Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. I want to tell you a story of a black family who overcame incredible odds that no group outside of black Americans have ever had to contend with. A story about a family who clawed a living and a future out of the cold, dead earth. A story about the malignant anti-black forces of America who attempted to steal from them what was theirs. I want to tell you a story about perseverance, and ultimately, a story about victory. Our story begins in 1941 in Barlow Bend, Alabama, where a black man, Joe Ely, bought 127 acres of land at a cost of $2,500. This black man did this in the heart of the dirty South. He staked his claim and took control of the land, part of which had been a slave plantation a few generations earlier. He used the land as a homestead and a farm. In more recent years, his descendants have used it as a place for family gatherings. This is what a lot of black families did in the years following the end of chattel slavery. They began to acquire land, and lots of it. At the beginning of the 20th century, black Americans owned 20 million acres of land in the U.S. Today, it's been whittled down to only 2 million. One legal scholar out of Boston says that a conservative estimate of the value of the land stolen from black Americans is $326 billion, and that's a conservative estimate. This stolen land was the result of deliberate government policy, legalized land theft through a number of different laws and government agencies, all working together to steal what belongs to us. The excuses that they used range from petty to outright false technicalities all the way to the old "I'm white and I say so." And that brings us back to Joe Ely. In 1959, he died unexpectedly, and his wife not long thereafter. Unfortunately, Mr. Ely didn't have a will, as many black people and white people, for that matter, don't have wills, so control of his land was automatically divided between his 15 children. That was back in the 1950s. Decades passed. America's population grew. Businesses looked for choice real estate to build on, and a lot of them began the predatory practice of specifically looking for black landowners who they could go after, because the laws had been written in a way so as to allow white interested parties to take a black family's land. And when you look at how consistently the laws have been used to target black landowners, you realize that's exactly what those laws were meant to do.
The person who purchased an outside interest, I guess, sent a letter unsolicited to a couple members of the family. They had no idea of the ramifications that it would create, and when we found out about it, it was by way of a lawsuit from the gentleman who purchased the interest, and he said that he had an intent to buy all of the land.
Many southern states had a law that allowed anyone who buys even one share of a family's land to be able to sue the remaining heirs and force them to sell their entire property. Most landowners don't even know about this, which makes a property with heirs easy targets for predatory real estate types. Many white real estate developers have used this exact legal maneuver to take land from black families. As I said, they specifically target black landowners. In the case of the Ely estate, there were 15 heirs, which meant the property had 15 shares. In 2012, a man named James Deschler convinced some distant cousins to sell their share of the Ely estate at a fraction of its value. Of course, what these cousins didn't know was that the entire reason this Deschler character wanted to buy their land was because that would give him legal standing to sue the rest of their family in an attempt to force them to sell their shares to him. The land Joe Ely bought is valued today at an estimated $212,000. Of course, we all know when it comes to black people, they always claim that our property is worth far less than it actually is. Which would certainly explain why this Deschler person wasn't willing to let this lawsuit go. You see, lawsuits are costly, and they take a long time. Deschler was probably thinking that the black heirs of Joe Ely would cave into the financial pressure he was putting on them, and he would get that 127 acres for a song. He would hit them with a nuisance suit, and they, of course, wouldn't have the financial means to fight him in court, and then he would be able to offer them a quick, tiny settlement just to go away, and they would, of course, say yes to it. This is exactly how it has gone for so many black families who owned land, especially in the Deep South. And Deschler almost got away with it. Though one of Joe Ely's grandsons, Michael Robinson, wasn't about to let some interlopers steal his family's land. He led the effort to hold on to the family estate. First thing he had to do was to reach out to the family members and make sure they knew about the land and put their heads together to hold on to it, and also to make sure everybody had a heads up about the trick that the Robinsons' cousins fell for. Robinson also reached out to the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, a nonprofit group of black farmers and landowners in southeastern states that's been providing legal and technical assistance to those who need it. As Robinson himself put it, "I didn't want someone to say, that generation didn't fight to keep the land in the family, so we adopted this motto of, not on our watch." And he was right. Too many times black people have allowed apathy to beat us. We think it's just too much trouble to fight for what's ours. Well, that was in 2012. The lawsuit that Deschler filed lasted several years and God knows how much money. Keep in mind, this was the Deschler guy who was keeping this going. Also, the Robinsons had to see it through to make sure that nobody else tried this in the future. A shame for Deschler, though, that he didn't try this stunt a few years earlier, because while this lawsuit was winding its way through the courts, the laws had changed to address specifically this kind of land theft.
As I continued to do research, I was able to get directed to the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and find out about a law that had changed within the last 5 or 6 years that actually would allow us to get the lawsuit dismissed. And if we could get it dismissed, it would remove the threat of the gentleman being able to buy or purchase the land out from under us.
Even so, it still took several years before a judge would finally hand down a ruling on the case, but in 2021, the attorneys representing Robinson and his family finally got Deschler's land grab lawsuit dismissed. That put an end to this sleazy opportunist attempt to snatch their family land, but the remaining problem was that he still owned that 1/15 of the estate. Michael Robinson understood that this guy had to be sent packing no matter what. So the heirs of Joe Ely kept fighting in the courts until August of this year, when they were able to force that Deschler creep to give up that 1/15 interest of their land that he had taken. They keep the land, and he walks away empty-handed, and that's how all happy stories end. But understand, it took them over a decade to get it done. The land is, according to white appraisers, valued at a little over $200,000. Now keep in mind, this is 127 acres of land. And for those of you who don't know, an acre of land is roughly the size of one football field. How much do you think it costs to buy enough land for one football field? Now, how much do you think it costs to buy 127 football fields? See, this is what happens when they lowball black people on the property values for what we own. It's meant as a way to steal wealth from us. White power lies about our property values to make our property cheap to buy, and then as soon as a white person owns it, suddenly they claim its value has shot up because of the color of who owns it. That's the game they play. Black people need to understand it is not some victimless crime to not have a will or a trust or some form of clear title to your property. These racists specifically prey on us because they have a crooked system that they own and control that largely will allow them to do it. Michael Robinson did right by his grandfather, and he also did right by his own children as well. In fact, it was his future heirs that he was thinking about.
What I'd like to do is really make it so that our children aren't starting at zero.
So our children aren't starting at zero. You know, that's verbatim what I and others of the new voices of black media have told you, that every black generation makes its children start from zero, and that's a cycle that has to be broken. I don't know whether Mr. Robinson is a listener to the new voices of black media or if he knows someone who is, but the phrase he used is just too specific for me to think that it was only a coincidence. But either way, he's got his head on straight. An inheritance matters because that's your child's piece of the world. It's something tangible and of value that belongs to them. Anti-black racism's not going to fall on its own. We're going to have to knock it over. But that means power. And that means we're going to have to fight for it. What we have to accept is that this fight isn't going to be quick or easy. That's the entire point of telling you about the Ely estate saga. Our ancestors are worth fighting for. Our children are worth fighting for. Our dignity is worth fighting for. Our respect is worth fighting for. Our power is worth fighting for. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because this incident is a perfect example of what I've always told you. When we fight, we win. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Bobby Williams, Jimmy Whitfield, Elaine Zanga, Frederica Moore, and Ogeneru Imu Asa. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.